Chile here with Sirius Dallas Moon, Mars or Mars Day, Antares. You can call it Antares with this midheaven. Ascendant conjoined. Ascendant is on the degree where we will have the eclipse, conjoining Venus at 29 degrees Aquarius, Mars 13 degrees Aquarius. Today, Pluto will ingress to the 4th degree of Aquarius. And I was talking about military alliances at the age of social protests and how we can unify um, the requirement um, to have a military alliance or to have a military. In the first episode, I was debunking the Franz Ferdinand assassination and World War One clause clause of alliance that started supposedly the World War One as an explanatory force, and I was addressing the actual resource allocation, which was the railway system. I was making the analogy to the current situation, and I was addressing Prisoner X and the fall of 8200, no longer elite unit in the Israeli military. At the same time, I was addressing the significations of Neptune in Aries, both as fighting for social rights, as the challenge to sovereignty, and the need in the systems that support sovereignty, and as a beginning of unification from the challenges to the opportunities, and how we can use our defense budget to actually improve upon sovereignty and prepare for the aftermath of the war, saving ourselves a lot of hurdle and addressing a lot of social unrest. So, continuing on that journey. Okay, and of course, I was addressing the issue of cultural revolution, and I dedicated lengthy time to give both concrete study cases of how that could affect interpersonal relationships, as well as the overall structures and institutions of culture, academics, hospitals, and even monasteries. Continuing on this trajectory, when we understand that all of our technologies, the wave-based technologies, the treatment methods need to support sovereignty and sense of self, and that's what the big war is about. Zero rape was used to create dissociative identity disorder and siphon energy and material resources that come with that. This war is exactly about that, and to try to create slaves, and this war is exactly about that. It's not the image of abolitionists, and I addressed the Jesuits case. Okay, Jesuits were practicing MK Ultra programming. I also addressed the fact that, as an academic, there were, in retrospective, what I understand as big attempts to put me in the continuation of the Epstein case, because Epstein was already okay. So for those people that thought that the Epstein was then it is not was, it is. So yeah. Um, and I addressed the topic of the rite of passage. I gave Chaos theory and nonlinear dynamic systems, together with the example of when classified technologies hold the scientific progress, but how does that affect us as when we think about military intelligence? We cannot assume pseudoscience. Okay, it's a completely different epistemic standards for empiricism. If we assume that somebody is just hallucinating when they say that, I don't know, they're being, let's say a person in Finland says, I'm being listened out by the KGB, and people administer olanzapine to them. By the way, they don't. Because after they had to work with the Nazis, they began to stop just castrating people and began to do housing first and open dialogue, which is basically reintegrating the person and believing their testimony, which is an intelligence advantage. Doesn't work for the population agendas, but we need to understand that this war is about zero rape society. Neptune is in Aries. It's abolitionist o'clock. Now, if we know that in advance, and this is why I say right now, if we talk, I'm not, how should I say, I don't know whether I should talk about NATO, because I want that to be more than NATO. I want it to be a military alliance case. NATO has Article 5. NATO is the most active military alliance. Nobody cared that New Zealand and Australia have a pact with them where it didn't save the Pacific Islands from the radiation and being dependent on food aid for literally the rest of the coming decades. Okay, nobody cares that New Zealand and Australia have a military pact. Everybody cares that if one of them, that if some island, I don't know, is a threat to a NATO country, then that place gonna go boom very quickly. And that's what I mean when I say military alliance that is actually functioning. Now, people are not eager to spend money on protection where the same technologies that are developed at wartime are going to be used, are going to be experimented on people, are going to be used to target individuals. However, if we take the premise of Neptune in Aries as supporting not the image of, but actually genuinely supporting sovereignty as individual. Aries is individual sovereignty. Those that will win the wars will support individual sovereignty the best. Okay? It's even worse than Uranus in Gemini. Uranus in Gemini 7 years. That one's 15. And it's going to meet Aries in Aries. The Renaissance. Okay? Neptune conjoining Aries in Aries with the Rahu Chiron, to me, this is a second Renaissance. Right now, we only have the upcoming to the Renaissance. Leonardo da Vinci was painting the faces of common women, and we even had the patrons and the elite women beginning to show their faces to the camera, to the painter, inspired by Da Vinci's technique, the softness of the depiction of the face, the accentuation of the light of the skin, the big hands of the Madonna. It was the most humanist of artists and quite opportunist. Okay, he invented very scary weapon, very torturous weapon. And why? Because upon the Neptune ingress to Taurus, we're basically entering a renaissance. But before that, we have the face is Aries. Sidereally, the entry to the Renaissance is the entry to Aries rather than to Taurus. The time where a portrait of a commoner could become an artifact that we still have at the Louvre. Why is it at the Louvre? Why is it not in Italy? And this is, by the way, an unfinished, completely unprecedented, as far as we can date. Okay, we had yes, the Roman and the Hellenistic statues of the nudities of the man and the woman, and they did look, youthful. But when it comes to portrait paintings, it was unprecedented to see the face of a commoner and not the body of a goddess being, or a god or a goddess being set in stone or being historically captured in a way that stood, I think it's already 5 centuries. Okay, they can be, and by the way, even when I was studying filmmaking, it was considered breaking of the convention to have the face of the actor looking directly at the camera. And I know that because I broke that convention. I have Mercury in sign of Aries. Mercury is camera and picture, and Aries is the face. And it's trining Neptune, which is conjoining my midheaven from Capricorn. So Neptune Capricorn, the convention, Neptune filmmaking, the break of the convention, Neptune agreed with Mercury. It was an amazing shot. Um, my filmographer almost killed me, but that was the one. That was the one nervous breakdown that I had on set. I was the most tolerant, patient person. That was the one time when I was the tyrant, and I think it was worth it. So once we get that this war is such a mythical Aries signification, and if we make the artistic analogy of Da Vinci being so well known for a portrait of a common woman that was unfinished, and the upcoming transit, we understand that the mythical importance of the individual commoner is going to be something to world war about. Now, when we get that, we need to come out of, if it is NATO, we need to come out of the Gladio mindset. Okay? We need to come out of the drug looting as wealth of nation mindset. If we can already de-black mold a house and put there people that need housing first and have an intelligence advantage over all the other countries and alliances that rape to train intelligence, then we are having an unprecedented military advantage that can date all back to before Sparta, all back to Troya. That could have even prevented Trojan War. Okay, Aries in the sign, the end decan of Aries. What did it mean that Aries was not invited to the table as the sister of Mars? Why wasn't she invited? She didn't go to the rite of passage. What was the rite of passage? The same Dionysian rituals that are the embark on the best, the cream de la cream universities to this date. Rape raves, however Dionysian. Yes, the fault of Eris was that Eris herself didn't quite get that because she caused people to rape one another and so on and so forth, and so she inflicted upon um, the damage that the damage because of which she was disincluded to begin with. Because what she was disincluded was a table that was serving poison. And this we understand when Eris is in Andromeda. Again, there is the Eris story, and then there is the evolution of the myth as the evolution of the planets through the constellation. Eris in Andromeda constellation is different to Eris in Pisces. Okay, Hitler had Eris in Pisces with Jupiter in Aries, and he felt disincluded from being a warrior with the Prussian Empire. Okay, he was coming from what we now know as Austria, and he wasn't called to fight. That was what made him disincluded. He said, and he had a history teacher that taught him that the big empire was also inclusive of him, that he was also, whether it was Prussian or German or Irish. Okay, just think, what if Hitler had a different history teacher? And mind you, that was the only place where he began to rebel his father. A time where a young man begins to rebel his father is very important at the construction of that young man's legacy. Okay, what if the children of all the Epstein list would rebel their fathers? Just, okay, not even talking about the mother, just one component, one point of interference. Now, when we think about the Gladio mindset, completely not compatible with the aftermath of this big war. Does it mean NATO has to dissolve or a military alliance has to dissolve? No. Does it mean he has to rethink? Yes. Usually people think about military as control over, and then they try to force people into the military by saying, oh, only people that serve in this and this elite unit, going back to 8200. 8200 was so much the cream de la cream that when a person for whom this unit wasn't included in the Manila in a mandatory army service, when I was actually supporting a professional army service, because I don't think all people are compatible with military career. And I knew a person that was in 8200 that were so raven about 8200 that I made that connection. Okay, and usually people say only people that served at an elite unit or this unit or that unit will get a discounted house or will get certain funding. Or in United States, the people that served in the army get funding for first degree, and those are Ivy League first degrees. Okay, it wasn't a mandatory army service in usual times, but to get funding for a degree, one would need to serve in the army, unless they have parents that are already Epsteining, so much so that they can be donors to the university and not rely on being the 1% mentally deprived person, not unintelligent. BIPOC people know what I'm talking about. It's not enough to be BIPOC. They want the person to prove that they will somehow have a chance to go through the rite of passage, which means they have to show that they are so eager. Okay, if I would go to study in United States as they wanted me to study, not just me, everybody, then basically I would have to show that I'm so eager. Which would completely negate my ability to do science. Just as when people asked me when I was teaching English, why don't you do a teacher certificate in teaching bigger classes and so on and so forth? Really, why? The reason they hire me is because you can't treat 40 students with the same diligence as you can treat a small group of people. You can't do science when the rite of passage is to agree to classify the technologies that would prevent a war if used right and would create slavery, trafficking, and crimes against humanity, upon which later the sovereign states are blamed to be dissolved. People like Israel, no, Nazi Germany. And then United States looted the Nazi scientists in paperclip. We see that with ICE. Uh, uh, it's a very dark joke. We're joking that they killed Eichmann so that he wouldn't tell on where the children of Yemen are. Now, back to the Armenian. Pluto is in the 5th house of Israel, and Neptune in the 5th house of the United States. If we work with Neptune here as the myth, the downfall. Okay, the British Empire used psychiatry, the myth of psychiatry. This was the first degree essay. The myth of psychiatry, my first degree essay, as establishing or preserving the class identity and the national identity of the British Empire during colonialist times. Okay, they invented psychiatric hospital. There wasn't even a science of psychiatry then. And then they had the people within Great Britain saying, why do the people in the Indies company get better psychiatric treatment than us? This really happened. They try to do that in Israel now. And they love to import American doctors. It said I saw and overheard a conversation on the train of a guy that was funded by a Zionist movement to bring academic people and particularly doctors from United States, and he says almost impossible because they're paid so well there. They can be Jews, but they paid so well there And they live so well there that they don't see an incentive to move to Israel. And by the way, they weren't even letting him rest between flights. Like they were that cheap. And he had to show that he doesn't waste their money. Okay, he had to show that he wishes to take on this position. He doesn't even waste their money. That's quite a jet lag between Tel Aviv and New York, um, or East Coast, West Coast, South, or even Middle. Of course, nobody know. I worked at sales. Nobody would be able to recruit anybody if they didn't have their good night's sleep, their coffee. Doesn't have to be, a decent Dionysian rape rave. And here's the thing: they have the Dionysian rape raves, but they don't have the cup of coffee before they come to talk with someone on something that would completely decrease their wage. Like if I had to recruit an American doctor, my first go-to would be, hey, you get to have a patient that can actually stay at hospital after giving birth, which means more satisfied patients. You have better reputation, but unfortunately, I cannot tell them that they will have to work less hours. If I could say that, or the best line of recruitment is very relevant to military alliances, they know to make the right analogies. If I could tell somebody, hey, you could holistically treat a patient, you wouldn't have to commit a surgery that could be considered crime against humanity in retrospective in order to provide for care. You wouldn't be persecuted like Dr. Mengele. Like, you can't say it, but it's like, okay. You mean I can grow my family without having to commit work? Yes. I get to actually say yes. If I see corruption testimonies protect, because to me, your testimony is intelligence advantage. And to them, it's an intelligence threat. Finland could not sustain in the face of the KGB. The KGB is not incompetent. People like to talk about Russia as if it's this underdeveloped region. None of that. But just like every other intelligence, the training was rapey. And so when Finland did Housing First and open dialogue to treat psychiatry, just schizophrenia and psychosis. What is psychosis? A testimony. Okay, when I take a look at research, one of the methods, both as interviewer and for scientific research, is the testimonies of people. And if I can infer what is happening from the testimonies of people, patient tells me they have butterflies in their mouth, and they want to stop the butterflies in their mouth. Okay, butterfly, monarch, in their mouth. Why? Something to do with the gate of speech. Want to stop, so something violating on the gate of speech. And of course, there could be a dissociation here. Is she giving me a dissociation of something? Did they went through some sort of oral rape or something? They want to stop the monarch butterfly. Are they being attacked right now? Well, a technology that could observe the frequency anomalies could tell me a little bit more about the case. It should be wave-based and sensitive to the wave and frequencies. What are the frequencies of those butterflies? What would be the frequency or the imaging that I would have when she doesn't experience those butterflies and when she does? I'm not talking about a speculative case. It's an actual case that I saw. By the way, when when I was dealing with the backlash to my research, a person saying they have problem with the neighbors, they find themselves in a closed psych ward. They can't hold them there forever. Now, the next time they will have problems with the neighbors, some crime organization tell them, okay, let's explode the building. You don't want to be in psych ward forcibly for something that doesn't contribute to your mental health again, right? Maybe that person say, no, no, I don't do these things. One time, two time. Then they say, wait a second, we can give you a house. Look at this government not giving you a house. Look at this. You served in the this and the this. They don't give you a house. Or the, well, we can give you a house. Why wouldn't the countries that comprise the military alliances anticipate that threat and tend to that on time? Why did they need to make Adolf Hitler homeless and tortured and a margin in society before he would be offered the training to become a politician? All they had to convince him is, yeah, it's that. Those are bankers. Those are bankers. Those are bankers. All of them are bankers. Then we get a lot of girls and children from some Epstein that was a Jew that was trafficking Jews. And this is not speculative. And the Jews that thought it was blood libels, their shoes are piling up. It was right around the 1990s where we were taught that there were blood libels. But nobody talked to us about ritual abuse happening. And back then it was the Epstein ring. Oh, that's anti-Semitic. It's anti-Semitic to prevent the Holocaust. Okay? It's those things in each and every tribe or nation. It wasn't without the Palestinian women trafficked by Palestinian men and women that this entire genocide parade would be allowed. And after the genocide, they're back in Gaza. What are they building? There's something that really reminds of something that looks like a digital prison. They say, but they had They said they were open air prison. Now they said they are digital prison. Perhaps it's something that's beyond the scope of like the region. Okay, now if we keep going gladio mindset, it wouldn't be before the 2060s that we'll have the actual explosion. Now the 2060s is right about um, where Neptune is already in the Renaissance, and Pluto is okay. The 2040s, we end of 2040s, we're gonna have no, the 2040s, we're gonna have the ingress of Pluto to Pisces. It's romantic era o'clock. When I say romantic era, I mean the time where they began to ideate the foaming monster sea. Okay, if you go to Northern Europe and you see this foaming monster sea, that was about the time where being at the shore, which could have been a life-risking endeavor, was began to be a romantic place to, let's say, date or something, or romantic place to be. It's the ideation of um, the depth of the psyche of the soul. And it's considered, a lot of people argue whether it's a part of the Enlightenment, not a part of the Enlightenment. I have ascendant Pisces. I'm biased to say that it's a part of the Enlightenment. Okay, we cannot have rationality without acknowledging irrationality. If you want to understand, if you want a good example of music um, that captures the essence of the spirit of the time, the most modern and moderate one would be Claire Laloune. And this is where music became personal, not so personal that it was the the discussion of the inner of the psyche. You think about the difference between the musical scores that depict the great wars, um, the epos, and the romantic era. Then Claire Laloune really goes into the depth of the psyche of the individual person, what goes inside the battles inside the individual person's psyche. Okay, particularly at the end of Pisces, this is true. Pisces can definitely be the epos, but it's going to be, how should I say that? It's not going to be as orderly scaled as the Romantic era. Of course, in Eastern traditions, we see scales that are completely, they are the astrology to um, they are the astrology to the astronomy. And by the way, the minor scale is considered the happy scale in Eastern traditions. Very difficult emotionally to get used to as a person that grew up on the uh, basically the culture that was, even the pop culture was affected by the 4-beat classical music, where major chord was the happy tone. It's very rich, but at the beginning, for a Western ear, it could be sounding sad. And then you see, well, there's something in that supposed sadness that is almost epic. Um, Once we understand that the budget of the military is not meant to anything but defend the individual sovereignty and allow the emergence of sovereignties from the individual sovereignty and support the individual sovereignty by design from those bigger sovereignties that are individual. Okay, if I think about the time of Benito Mussolini, they made the analogy between the country and the body, which is dating back to Leviathan by Hobbes. And if we make the analogy of the country as the body, we basically end up being fascist because each person is a disposable cell that regenerates in that country. And this is why I believe that Benito Mussolini, albeit being idealist, was not a good leader for human rights. He was great for the unification of Italy. But at what cost? And by the way, fascism was a conglomerate of, I think it was something around brutalism and something that emerges from Cubism to brutalism as the art, because you can't have a regime in Italy without art. Also in Germany, but the supposedly, it's not capitalistic economy, but it's an economy that is it's definitely not social rights. Okay, and the even the art was the ideation of the machine as well as the fit body. I don't remember what was the name of that art branch. And this really is reminding us of what we have today. Okay, is it AI or is it a person? The Spartan ideation, which is also the body ideation. Um, Wait a second. Oh no. And then the imagery of the state as a living organism, but the people like, in praxis were rejuvenating cells. So Aries reminds us that the sovereignty here is not carpal in the sense, in the Hobbesian sense, that the individual sovereignty is a fractal that can emerge into human rights based regime and military alliance. Okay, we're shifting from what is the one thing that can sustain the hard aspects between the outer planets? It's a sense of self, because army, Mars is sovereignty. Also, when it comes to the energy, to the life energy, to the occultism, so we cover the Scorpion. If we cover the Scorpion, we cover Aries. We have at least 300, and if we count in Aries, 500 years of peace, world peace. It's unprecedented. But Sedna was never in Gemini before in 12th millennia. Okay, what is Sedna's story? Sedna's story is a story of extortion cults and the abolition of extortion cults. How do people they venerate Sedna to have a good relationship? How do people have good relationship when the father doesn't sell the daughter to some trafficking extortion ring to have demonic powers where eventually they have no food because of all of the weird policies that they do? And people have to send the shaman to appease Sedna. Can't have a good relationship in this type of society. We are in the time, in the day and age where Santa Maria is being discussed as a young trafficked girl that was raped to bring Jesus. Unprecedented in the history that didn't go missing. Okay, with Neptune, I always have to take into account that something went missing. Neptune, Saturn, what went missing in history? Okay, or how many scientists went missing before we had the Cultural Revolution that is considered to be until intellectual? Okay, the European word for Epstein is the true. The Israeli ones, all of them. So why does the Israeli one sound so much like the American English? Some say we live in an American military basement. But another star. So I hope that the principle of coming out of gladiologic and the understanding that if we appease the Mars conditions for Aries and Scorpio, which is sovereignty in spirit, in matter, and in sex, zero rape. That guarantees access to the underground water. And the clear underground water, they are more important than any gas and oil. Okay? People think that they can regulate the water and then invent water that they can drink. No, that cheap laden water is not. And when one thing hacked, everything can be. Age of air. So when the outer planets are in disagreement, having a clear Mars that necessitates zero rape, zero slavery. Okay, Aries is necessity. Sovereignty, sense of self is a necessity. Just like we need the clear access to the underground water and underground resources to have a sovereignty, to fund for our sovereignty, we fund for our sovereignty by supporting our sense of self, and we're supporting our sense of self by funding for our sovereignty. And we can't violate our sovereignty to fund for our sovereignty. This is why a mother that wants to protect her children can't just go and be raped for money to protect her children, because then the child becomes the parentified child. The child can either commit suicide or become a trafficker themselves. Okay, Alondra Montauk has had a mother that was in the network, and she was advocate supposedly for sex workers' rights. He was inbred to be, he was raped to be a breeder, to become an Epstein. That thing doesn't sustain 5 centuries. I'm not even talking about 12 millennia. Doesn't sustain 5 centuries. Now, if we want to think in terms of 5 centuries, because China does. Whether they're right or wrong about how they think in 5 centuries, they definitely do think in 5 centuries. The only way to appease 5 centuries, planets going, conjuncting, squaring, trining, sextiling, this sextiles with this but opposes this, and this is radiation and the atoms. Social revolutions and psychology. Politics and drugs. How do we sustain sovereignty? What in those arguments and agreements supports a sense of self? How do we continue to support a sense of self when these folks argue and when these folks agree? Sense of self, the I am, the individual human right and sense of self. Anything that deviates from that deviates from being an effective military protection alliance, basically is deviating from protecting the I am of anything. The I am of so and so empire, as well as the I am of so and so individual. Aries is all of them. Neptune could make us think that we need to sacrifice. Okay, I gave the example. If a mother is being raped to supposedly support her child, that child becomes the parentified child, would either be suicidal or would be trafficker himself or would be susceptible to be sacrificed. Now we can't judge the mother because she's already traumatized. But we can understand what does that generate in a system: invasion, political assassination. People talk about Franz Ferdinand. That creates the Franz Ferdinand, the assassination. Invoking of Article 5. It's as easy as one mother had to deal with the handler because she thought it would save her child from being raped. Okay? Just think how far away from Gladio do we need to go to sustain a military alliance and intelligence. Uranus in Gemini is definitely going to be polarities and civil war clock on abolishing of slavery within particularly NATO. Now, the only functioning military alliance, not military alliance is NATO. Do they not need to be funded to sustain? Well, how do we weight that with the fact that people want to have housing, job opportunities, a future for the people want to feel like there's something that they're defending. And it can't be an image or the breaking of a dream. Do I also think that NATO has the most potential to rejuvenate and sustain through these challenges and be an example of changing with the times in a way that could evolve and emerge to a 5 century, okay, thinking that can grant world peace? I think the potential is there. I wouldn't bother to cover a military alliance for an entire year if I didn't think otherwise. If I thought otherwise. It was born in Gladio. in the context of Gladio. It doesn't have to stay there. We were in the century of Neptune, sextile Pluto, 2060s, they're already square. It was born in the bisextile with Neptune in Libra instead of Aries, Pluto in Leo instead of Aquarius, and Uranus in Gemini, that now we have a Uranus return. It gained a lot from the Civil War clock. It sustained the fall of the USSR. All those countries are NATO countries almost. But to stand the test of 5 centuries, and China is thinking 5 centuries. And again, I'm not saying they're competent in thinking 5 centuries, but the very fact that they think 5 centuries forward is already competence. Even if we could disagree, or the very fact that they tend to that. By the way, hospitals in China, there was one hospital that was listed as one of the best for uh, medical tourism. But then, very amazing place, great service. Okay, I was seeing the video of person that visited there, and they said because it's a governmental hospital, they actually get more resources. Fantastic. All the doctors have at least gender expression of men. And I'm like, I would be scared. Why aren't there women there? Everything says it's good, it's okay, it's getting government funding. Like, but why are there women there? But if I'm a woman, would they use some stuff that are not good for the endocrine system of the fifth vital sign? Like, does that affect now? It's not a lot of doctors, but they're the best of the best, and I don't see anything that even gender performs as a woman there. Yeah, it definitely looks like a good hospital. I love it that government funding is actually more resources for better medicine. But yes, it is. There it is. But it's kind of scary to know, like there are women at the reception, but none of the doctors is a woman. It's definitely not competence. Like, is that going to affect? Like, maybe it's a good hospital for men to go to, but not for women to go to. Like, I don't know. Okay. By the way, with NATO, we have a lot of, at least when it comes to gender performance or gender expression, we have diverse gender expression. Gender expression. Okay, we could have women with gender expression of men and men with gender expression of women, and taking into account cloning projects, it's very difficult to um, to conclude which is which. Both in the prime ministers and the representatives of nations, and in the staff themselves. Does it go to the generals? I don't know, but what is, if you ask me as a person that tended to political assassination prevention, and those things are in par with invasions and terrorism, what is the number one risk? Extortion calls. It's the Epstein's gates of every region. I didn't mean to study terrorism. I was just tending to political assassination prevention because I saw that people that were escaping, let's say, violent relationships were not actually getting help. And then I said, okay, what are more cases that I can